Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a massive, systemic transformation happening right under our noses, out on the open ocean. We're looking at how a crazy mix of overlapping global crises, from fierce geopolitical conflicts to climate change, is forcing a radical shift in Germany's maritime strategy. The stakes here? Absolutely massive. The ripples of this shift are going to be felt across global supply chains, ultimately impacting the very goods getting delivered right to your front door.
So to really get into this, we first need to understand the driving force behind the whole shebang, the Zeitenwende. You've probably heard this German term floating around. It literally translates to a historical turning point, or the dawn of a new era. Following recent global shocks, this concept has become the absolute anchor for fundamentally changing how national security and economic policies are designed. It's not just a buzzword, it's a true strategic awakening.
To make sense of all this, we're going to break it down into four core pillars today: geopolitics and contested waters, supply chain sovereignty, modernizing ports, and finally, a green energy transition.
Right off the bat, the reality of the situation is incredibly stark. Gabi Bordheim, the president of the German Shipowners Association, pretty much hit the nail on the head. She said, without a strong and independent merchant fleet, there is neither economic stability nor national security. Think about that for a second. The maritime domain isn't just about moving steel boxes full of consumer goods anymore. We are literally talking about national survival, resilience, and keeping society functioning.
Let's move into our first pillar: geopolitics and contested waters, the security side of things. Because of its sheer immensity and the cover it provides for covert action, the ocean has rapidly become the ultimate arena for modern great power rivalry. To grasp the scale of this, we're looking at a fascinating SWP report on the Baltic Sea region. The analysis details how the Russian war in Ukraine has completely rewired the security architecture of Europe. Almost overnight, it turned the Baltic Sea into a massive focal point of geopolitical interest and, frankly, potential conflict.
Look at how rapidly this map is changing. Back in the Cold War era, the Warsaw Pact actually called the Baltic the Sea of Peace, completely divided between them and NATO. But jump to today's reality? With Sweden and Finland officially joining NATO, the alliance basically surrounds the entire Baltic Sea. This leaves Russia's exclave of Kaliningrad and the port of St. Petersburg as serious strategic bottlenecks. You can feel the tension. Reports even highlight recent Russian naval exercises involving the live firing of Kalibr cruise missiles right in these increasingly confined waters.
But the nature of the threat? It's totally evolved. The front line isn't just traditional military ships facing off anymore. It's all about highly disruptive hybrid attacks on critical infrastructure. We're talking unidentified drone flights buzzing over nuclear power plants, the massive sabotage of the Nord Stream pipelines, and super-targeted attacks on Norwegian submarine cables and sensors. It's this messy, complex blend of transnational crime, cyber attacks, and covert state action, all designed to unsettle Western societies.
So how is Germany responding to all this? Well, they're stepping up to offer structural command within NATO by proposing a German-led regional maritime headquarters in Rostock. Plus, they've actively deployed frigates to protect vital Norwegian energy infrastructure. However, the experts do point out a bit of a gap in this grand Zeitenwende ambition. Right now, Germany's only planning to buy 5 P-8A Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft rather than the initially planned 8. Critics argue that kind of falls short of the reconnaissance muscle actually needed out there.
All right, moving on to Pillar 2, supply chain sovereignty. This is the economic side of the equation.
To truly grasp why these waters are so fiercely protected, you have to look at the sheer, mind-boggling scale of global trade that depends on them. 1,764. That is the number of ships currently making up the German merchant fleet. That puts them 7th globally, with a gross tonnage of 47.4 million. To put that massive economic weight into perspective, more than 60% of all German imports and exports rely entirely on this single maritime transport network. No shipping, no economy. It's that simple. But here's the thing. While Germany is undeniably a maritime powerhouse, the international competition is cutthroat, and the balance of dominance is shifting fast. If you look at the global container shipping sector specifically, Germany, sitting at 30.2 million gross tons, now ranks just behind China at 31 million and Switzerland at 34.7 million. Staying competitive in this environment is a relentless battle.
In that competitive edge, it's incredibly vulnerable to global choke points. Take a look at this number, 136 billion euros. According to a recent study, that represents the trade volume of German import and export goods that had to pass through the Red Sea in 2023 alone. That is roughly 10% of their entire global trade running through one highly volatile area.
And this brilliantly illustrates our next point. Disruptions in these choke points send absolute shockwaves to the economy. Compounding geoeconomic vulnerabilities are squeezing these supply chains from every direction. You've got Houthi rebel attacks in the Red Sea forcing ships to take huge, expensive detours. You're dealing with protectionist trade policies like the U.S. administration's 25% tariffs on European goods. Add to that an over 90% dependency on importing certain critical raw materials by sea. And then there's the intense political debate over foreign investment. Remember the debate over the Chinese shipping giant Costco buying a stake in a Hamburg port terminal? It's a perfect example of trying to balance open trade with a de-risking strategy. It is a very delicate tightrope.
Let's transition to Pillar 3, modernizing ports and fleets to prepare for the future.
Surviving these geopolitical and economic pressures means the industry absolutely cannot stand still. Adapting requires rapid, sweeping technological and logistical upgrades. But here's the catch. Modernization is tough, especially when you look at who actually makes up the industry. 80% of German shipping firms are small and medium-sized enterprises, or SMEs, usually operating fewer than 10 ships. These smaller guys are really struggling under the weight of heavy European bureaucracy and fragmented climate rules. Take the Supply Chain Due Diligence Act, for instance. Its goal of improving environmental standards is great, but it creates intense compliance and cost headaches for smaller operators, just trying to stay afloat, pun intended, in a global market.
To give the industry a fighting chance, the National Port Strategy outlines some very specific upgrades to keep German hubs secure and efficient. We're talking the rollout of lightning-fast 5G campus networks, like the one over at Container Terminal Altenwether, to drive heavy automation and digitalization. It also places a massive emphasis on implementing robust cybersecurity frameworks to fend off those hybrid threats we talked about earlier. And to fix the looming labor shortage, they're pushing hard for specialized STEM training to build a workforce that can actually run these high-tech hubs.
Speaking of the workforce, check out this super surprising and honestly really positive stat. 14%. That is the jump in brand new maritime training contracts just in 2024. It's a huge signal that young people are actually eager to jump in and help transition this traditional, old-school industry into a highly digital, modern era. Finally, Pillar 4, a green energy transition, the sustainability pillar. Because, let's be real, the Maritime Zeitenwende isn't just about military security or economic sovereignty. It's fundamentally about surviving climate change. To kickstart this massive transition to green energy, the German government has earmarked 400 million euros straight from its Climate and Transformation Fund. These modernization millions are set to implement the National Action Plan for Climate-Friendly Shipping over the next 4 years. Let's move to and see how this builds a sustainable future step by step. The 400 million euros will roll out strategically. Step 1 is heavy investment in alternative fuels and setting up green, climate-neutral shipping corridors. Step 2 focuses on expanding onshore power plants, basically allowing ships to plug into the local green grid while they're docked instead of idling their diesel engines. And Step 3 is a modal shift, essentially moving more cargo away from trucks and onto highly eco-friendly inland waterways.
Ultimately, if Germany wants to hit its national goal of greenhouse gas neutrality by 2045, the very DNA of a port has to change. They can't just be massive parking lots for cargo anymore. They need to fundamentally transform into sustainable energy hubs and carbon management centers. As Germany shifts its energy mix, these ports are going to become critical nodes in a sprawling, cross-European green energy grid, explicitly designed to import vast quantities of green hydrogen and its derivatives, like ammonia. It's a complete reimagining of the space.
Which brings us to our final thought. We've seen how the Baltic Sea has become this tense security bottleneck. We've seen how vital global trade routes are incredibly vulnerable to geopolitical shocks. And we've looked at the massive financial and technological leaps needed to make the industry green. The ultimate challenge of this Maritime Zeitenwende really boils down to one provocative question. Can a nation that is so heavily reliant on exports successfully reconcile open, global trade with the urgent need for national security, economic de-risking, and climate resilience? It is a high-wire balancing act that will absolutely define the next era of global economics. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep your eyes on the horizon.